Hi, welcome to Find My Team Conversations. My name is Barb Smith, and our guest today is Joselyn Hoselton. Jocelyn comes to us from the Minneapolis public school system and in Minnesota um, with lots of information and lots of experience, both with junior high and high school female student athletes, which makes her so valuable in this conversation. Right now, well, first of all, Jocelyn, welcome. Thank you for being here. I know that you went to Mary's University in Minnesota with a master's in education. I know your undergrad was at Mayville State University, where you got a BS in math and in phys ed. So your background speaks volumes to this conversation in this target group. And I believe you started right off teaching right out of college, and then got into coaching as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. I had an opportunity to attend grad school right out of college. In fact, I was looking to maybe explore the world of exercise science and coaching at small college, and some choices at the age of 22 just led me into public education instead. And then I pursued my master's degree a few years in.
So you've been doing this for what, 24, 25 years now?
Yes, seems like a long time.
That is a long, that's a long time. It's a long time and a lot of experience and a lot of, observations, which we're going to capture in this conversation, a lot of observations about what you have seen, even maybe as it has changed through your time in two different school systems. I apologize. I said Minneapolis, but I know it's, you started in Melrose and then went to Monticello. Is this correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and has it been in just two schools, or have you moved around a little?
Just those two.
Yes. Okay. So here's the interesting observation that I've just been doing some research and just, kind of being associated with Women's Sports Foundation. They have 6 main reasons why female student athletes are quitting at twice the ratio that boys are quitting. And one of them is lack of access. So there's 1.3 million less opportunities for girls than there are for boys right now, which is staggering in my viewpoint. The second is just safety and transportation. So, trying some of these families can't get to all of the different practices, or they have to go through unsafe neighborhoods to get to practice. So that's another issue for some families. Certainly the social stigmas, which are still out there, because social media puts out there, that you're supposed to be beautiful as a woman, and girls can be beautiful, but they aren't, strong, confident. So the stigma about playing sports means you're too masculine, or you're too gay, or something that might cause girls to stop playing. And then number 4 is decreased equality as they age. So as girls get older, the equality of the experience lessens. So worse facilities, worse gear, the hand-me-down uniforms, worse facilities or practice times, and all those sorts of things that could play a role. And then this one's probably for everybody, but costs. Schools are cutting budgets, especially through pandemic. The world is cutting costs. And so some of that has to now be picked up by families, whereas the schools may have used to have paid for some of this organized sports. And then lastly, just, and this is where you come in, Jocelyn, is the role models, the lack of role models that are coaching women. They don't see themselves coaching very often, in a coach. And they're not, they don't see role models as females who are strong and confident and strong female figures as role models. So I'm just listing those. It's come from obviously a very good source, but I wanted to get your take in what you have observed in terms of why female junior high, high school student athletes are quitting.
Well, the statistics you shared are alarming. I've worked both of the districts I've worked in Minnesota have been considered more outstate versus metro, and you are kind of pigeonholed in your own little world as far as what you see regarding access and transportation, and those issues maybe don't quite come into play where I have been. But I would say a couple of things probably are the major contributors when I've seen female athletes quitting. Number one is burnout. I think, kids are starting sports at such an age right now that, things like that didn't exist when I was that age. In one travel season or one, AAU or JO volleyball season, some club season, a kid can put in 50 to 60, games through tournaments and league and, however else it's organized. And it took 2 high school seasons for someone like me to get that amount of experience. And these kids are getting that as early as 8, 9, 10 years old. So I do think burnout comes into play. And I guess the other thing I would feel has contributed to the athletes that I've worked in wanting to quit is they somehow have expressed that they've lost their sense of love for the game, which I think is connected to them feeling a sense of belonging in a group.
Very good points. Very good points. Yeah, belonging and losing love. It's not fun anymore. And I know that this is another interesting stat that was done through study, is that when parents of young student athletes are asked, why does your daughter play? They say because she wants to win. And if you ask the student athlete about why she plays, it's because she wants to have fun. And those two answers really highlight, some of that you're talking about is the pressure and stuff and they're losing the fun. So winning isn't as important maybe as sometimes parents or even coaches, think.
Well, I think the athlete will get there as their skills develop and as they age and as they get to higher levels of play. I think those two certainly are not independent of each other. I think at such a young age, our families and parents starting their kids at such a young age for the right reason for the kid. Is it truly that the kid has an interest in winning at the age of 8 or 9 or 10? I don't know. I'm sure there are certain young kids that have that in them, but I would say the majority want to be part of something to have fun.
Yeah, and to feel like they belong and are participating in what you said earlier, that ties in so well. Let's just talk about this burnout for a second, because being a former college coach, there was burnout in college at early ages, and now high school coaches are saying these players are burnt out long before they get to college. It's already happening. So is that in effect because of they're starting so early, or that they're specializing, or that people are putting more pressure on them, or they're putting on themselves? What's your observation there?
All of the above. All of the above. We realized this, our high school staff here realized this several years ago when one of our athletes came to us after summer training and said, I'm putting in 8 to 10 hours of training a day in the summer. And we kind of stepped back and asked, how is that possible? We have you for 2 hours in the morning. And she said, well, I'm getting up and I'm going to the weight room. And then I'm going to volleyball, and then I'm going to golf, and then I'm maybe, going for a run. And when it's all said and done, it's an 8 to 10 hour training day that a 16, 17-year-old athlete is not physically prepared to train that way. It really allowed us to step back and figure out what's our role in providing some balance for these athletes so that they don't quit, because we all know the value of a multi-sport athlete, and keeping it fun so that they don't quit. And we adjusted what we have done in our summer training to hopefully provide a little bit more balance for those kids. Just realizing, we are high school athletics. We're not trying to get kids to specialize with us.
What are some of those things that you are talking about in terms of trying to help them find some balance?
We cut down the number of days a week we were asking them to come in. We're high school. We can't demand. We can't. Um, we can't hold playing time or anything like that against them once our season comes. So we just cut down the number of days that we were asking them to come in. We tried to stay away from weekends, including Mondays and Fridays, so that they could see the value that we're placing in them with their family time and the fact that they are still a kid and they need to enjoy summer. And then we tried to package any of our speed, agility, weight training within the time that we already had them coming in to be in the gym. So that it wasn't a separate, you talked about transportation issues a few moments ago. It wasn't a separate time where they had to get into town or for our non-drivers to have to, find a ride. So I guess those are things that have worked for us, and hopefully we're still doing enough that will help our program stay competitive.
Well, and you mentioned specialization. This is happening sooner and sooner, earlier and earlier in young athletes, very short careers. And I'm wondering, if this happens in your situation where maybe another coach from another sport says the athlete can only play one sport, or the club team is saying you should only play one sport, and are you up against specialization at early ages, even with parents or anything? Have you dealt with that?
I would say not directly from other programs within our school. We're a small enough school that I think we all see the need to have the multi-sport athlete. However, indirectly, I think some athletes and maybe some families have explored that or heard that message from clubs that they are participating in. And unfortunately, we have had players who have left our program with the idea of trying to specialize elsewhere. And again, we're small enough. We try not to push that on any one of our athletes. And we have, I think, a really good understanding with all the athletes or the coaches of the female programs in our district that we're not going to try to do that or sabotage each other. These are kids. We want to provide them all with the same life experiences.
Have you had to have conversations with parents and student athletes about the clubs not wanting them to play for the high school anymore? Have you had that situation?
A few times, and I guess we've tried to problem solve with them, trying to see their side of what they're trying to accomplish, and maybe encourage them to find another club or another program that would be willing to work with, a schedule of a high school sport. Ultimately, it comes down to what their end goal is. So we do try to have those conversations, but you're never knowing what you're going to get out of it.
Right. Well, what would you say, putting all this sort of together, you have a student athlete who either you feel wants to quit or they've lost some of their gumption about coming to practice or whatever, and you feel like maybe they're on the verge of quitting. First of all, would they tell you? And second of all, what are some techniques that you've used to help, maybe recalibrate for a kid or help her refocus on what's important?
Would the kid tell us? It depends on the kid. There have been a couple of girls that have been mature enough, they've been upperclassmen, and we've had really good relationships established already with the kid in our program. And they felt comfortable saying, I'm not sure if this is it for me, or if I'm going to continue with the program. And then I would say the majority of our girls that have contemplated quitting, we've heard about it through their teammates. So at that point, I think the biggest thing is you have to have a relationship established with the athlete where you've had open communication about roles and expectations and where do they belong, where do they see themselves wanting to be. I like having those one-on-one conversations, outlining, pros and cons of being part of the program or making the decision to quit. You know, what would you do with your time? Where are you going to gain the skill and the experience of working on a team, working through adversity, maybe being mentored in goal setting? And if they don't have answers to those things, you know, then we kind of take the conversation of, okay, how can I work with you to set some goals short term so that they can see progress and the benefit of staying involved, and then long term so that their decision is one that's being informed.
And are you doing this kind of once it gets going? Are you doing it regularly?
With those athletes, I think it has to be a regular check-in. You know, there was one athlete I did this with once per week. We just set a daily goal for a week, and then after the week was over, I checked in, and certainly, you know, small check-ins during practice during the week, you know, an extra, you know, pat on the back, an extra, hey, I'm pulling you aside to just give you a little bit of motivation. But at the end of the week, checking in to see how we're doing on the goals and if we need to revise, and you know, is there a break that's needed because of the burnout issue? You know, trying to just balance everything that will allow the kids some peace of mind that what they're trying to do is going to be worthwhile, but yet also providing them support so that they know they're not going through it alone.
That's awesome. So this is sort of like a template that you have, right? That you can maybe steer these young athletes back to the game, back to the sport, and allow them to process what they're feeling and going through while they stay in there, while they stay in the sport.
Right, because we all know it's not about the sport. It's about the bigger picture and developing this young female into someone who can go out into society after she leaves our hands and be a productive citizen in our world. And I think when it gets framed that way a little bit, they start to forget all the reason they want to quit sport, and maybe just get rejuvenated in, I can kind of see the benefit of doing this. I'll take it day by day. I'll take it week by week.
Find My Team is all about empowering student athletes. And it feels like you are, you know, we meet on that fundamental core belief here, and you're doing the same things. And I just applaud you for that, because I'm not sure, and maybe you can say I'm wrong here, but I'm not sure many coaches are taking that kind of time to really dive in and mentor and help these young athletes. Do you have a sense of that?
I think that every coach wants to. The key word that you said, Barb, was time. I've been a head coach. You've been a head coach. There's so much on the plate of a head coach, and especially at the upper level, you know, winning in a program is a high priority. Sometimes I feel like maybe that's a little bit backwards again in what we're trying to do with kids participating in sport. But when does a head coach have the time to put into all the emotional, the relationship learning part of what sport offers? And that's where I feel so lucky in my role as an assistant coach in a high school program. Is my priorities are different. My priorities can be more relational. Certainly, as I'm supporting the vision of the head coach and what they want implemented as far as skills and the technical side of the sport, but I just have kind of grown into my role as a relational coach, mentor for our female athletes that can help provide what our head coach isn't because of the time, you know, constrictions.
I think that's such a valuable point, that, you know, head coaches are in a different situation, and assistant coaches do have a little more flexibility, like you're talking about. And I remember that in my own, you know, even in college, that holds true a little bit. And so the importance of that assistant to be able to, for example, when a player wants to quit, most of the time players are venting about something. And it's so important for that assistant to understand that the venting is okay, but usually it's directed at, something like playing time or another teammate or a coach or something. And that assistant has to be so careful about where they steer the conversation or allow it to go, and try to back up, empower the head coach, empower the other teammates, or whatever whatever the angst is for the student athlete who's unhappy. It's important that that student or that assistant coach understands that big picture.
You're exactly right. And those conversations then usually come down to, what can you control? And I'm saying this, I'm posing that question to the student athlete. What is within your power? Are you responding to situations, or are you reacting to them? And so we have the conversation of trying to just change mindset from being a reactionary to being able to have the tools for how to respond. And more often than not, when you identify the things that the student athlete can control versus what they can't, they've never thought about it in that way. They've always thought about, this is being done to me. This is being done. This is happening to me. Well, you can't control all of the circumstances around you, but let's just identify that. And that goes back to the goal setting piece of the conversation. Let's identify the things you can control and make that our focus.
Great points. Great points. And so valuable for high school coaches, but also for club coaches, for college coaches, to be able to reach student athletes like this who have been trained so much because of youth sports starting so young, that it's serious. There's pressure. You must win, and there it does come with some angst and some pressure. And if there is somebody like yourself who can help them reframe all of that, they're going to be so much more successful down the road.
Well, and I'm certainly not, trained in being a mental performance coach, but I think these are things you figure out as you age yourself and through experience. There's nothing that my undergraduate teacher preparation and coach preparation courses did that could prepare you for what happens in real life. There's just no way to anticipate everything you're going to come across. And those are just some things that have worked for me, and I find that seem to be pretty appropriate for most of our student athletes when they're in that situation.
Well, this next question is such a good question for you, because you're a female on an all male coaching staff. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so, in your perspective and everything you've dealt with for the 25 years here that we're talking about, how important is it? There's a lot of debate over this, and we don't want to, it's not positive or negative, but how important is it, do you think, having a female on a staff for female sports? How important is that in your perspective?
I think that's something that I've recently come to just embrace in my role as well. I don't know that I knew myself the importance of having that female presence in an athlete's, as they're coming through programs, until, the last handful, 10, 12 years. Kids, we talked about kids starting in sports so early, and I don't think at such a young age, the kids themselves realize the difference. But we know that females go through such a different type of change in adolescence than males. And I don't know that it's even until they are at that teenage years, the formative years, that they're realizing what their needs might be. So I think it's super important. There are, the obvious physical changes and things that girls are going to feel comfortable coming to me about, with my presence there. But I've been through that. I can relate to that. I've walked in their shoes, and I just think there's a comfort level amongst the athletes when there is a female on the staff.
Do you think there's a way, and if you were speaking to some coaches that didn't have females on the staff, is there a way that the males can understand what you're talking about here and possibly come to a same, be able to help in the same way? Or do you think it really would be more beneficial just to have a female there?
Well, I'm going to love to advocate for having a female on staff, no matter what the sport is. But we know that that's not reality, and I know plenty of male coaches, as do you, I'm sure, that have quite the nurturing, emotional connection with their athletes. I don't think it's a lost cause. I think that our male coaches can find advocates outside of their program. They can find, relations or mentors in other female coaching, staffs, maybe in their school or their district, that can be supporters of them. I think there are ways for them to connect with the female on those issues if they don't have someone directly on staff. But what it's going to take is time, right? Which we said is just, especially for a head coach, where do you have the time to fit that type of development into your coaching repertoire?
Here's another, just as we're talking, and you and I have talked before about this, but do you think it's possible that a female, a young, youth sport female starts early and is coached by males, and then they get into maybe junior high and they're coached by males mostly, and this is just facts, I mean, this is just happening, and then high school they're coached by mostly males, that they develop this this like maybe wall, or the sense that I can't share who I really am, or I can't be a girl that shows emotions. I mean, social media does this. I mean, there's a lot of stigmas out there, and maybe she grows up and gets to the high school level and says, I can't express myself because she's never practiced that. She's never done that in sport. Do you think that, and I hope I'm being clear with that, but do you think that's a possibility?
It certainly well could be. It's hard to say without, having any statistics, but I would agree with you that I think the majority of females, when they start sport, are probably coached by men. That goes back to the fact that men have just had more opportunities. These people are fathers now. They've had more opportunities when they were young to participate in sport. So they are coming in with some experience than probably a lot of the moms of these kids maybe didn't have quite the opportunities, that we talked about earlier, just access. So I think definitely there's the possibility of that. And it goes back to what I said a few minutes ago. I don't know that the girls even realize what they don't know what they don't know. They don't realize what they're missing or needing until maybe it's too late, and then they're feeling stuck with no one to go to.
And so they quit.
They quit, or they find somewhere else where they can be expressive in who they are and feel that sense of belonging and nurturing relationship that they are needing.
Yeah. So I this is really an interesting concept to me, because what we're doing is empowering, you included, we're empowering these young women, and we have to work with years of them not being confident, not finding their voice, less leadership abilities. And possibly it's because in sports is supposed to do all of that for student athletes, but we're seeing that we're still developing a lot of that. Whereas if you took a young boy, the confidence is already there, and a lot of this is already established. So I'm just wondering if possibly this is something that we all could just look at as we're as we're sending our kids out to youth groups and, youth programs, that we could maybe make this adjustment and help these kids start earlier with this development.
I think what a game changer that would be, and not just in sport. I mean, that was I studied the female mathematician when I was going through my master's program, and just again the lack of availability of options for them. And sports certainly is a place where you and I have our hearts, and if we've got people that are willing to put the time in to making change, then I think it's a great thing to explore.
Mm. I think we might be onto something there, and I'm very interested in that. I'm if we're all about helping young people develop these skills through sport to be the future leaders, and this is way beyond the sport they play, way beyond even college, but they're going to be the future business leaders, community leaders, political leaders, educational leaders, medical leaders, that we could be so much further ahead than we are right now if we had this understanding. And I'm not sure that, I mean, as you said, I mean, I'm in the same boat. You don't know what you don't know. And I'm just now looking back and discovering this myself, because I was a coach, and you're so busy with what you're doing that you sometimes, forget where everybody came from, and you just see what the issues are at hand, really, and you try to deal with that and put out fires. But if there was an overall understanding of this, I think maybe we could approach it differently when they are in youth sports, junior high and high school.
Well, and don't you think that most youth sport coaches, like, the big picture of this is not even, on their minds? If I'm probably the typical, fourth grade travel coach, what's on the forefront of what I'm trying to do is teach the kid how to play the sport, teach the kid the physical skill. I would venture to say that most youth sport coaches don't have this big picture agenda on their minds when they agree to be a youth sports coach.
I think you hit it on the head. It is more about the sport for the entire trip of or journey that this young person, male or female, takes, through sport, through youth, junior high, high school. And because like you said, you've had some great points, the time, committing to this other thing when you're hired to, coach the sport or whatever. I can see where that's very gray on how much you're really affecting a student athlete with good and bad.
Fortunately for me and the places that I've been surrounded by coaching colleagues that have had, the idea of the big picture as part of the motivation for why we do what we do. So I'm not sure how you change that across the country, across the world. How do you get more people to embrace that at a younger age?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is awareness. The awareness of how it affects people long term, I think, would benefit. But then there has to be an openness about the way it's working now and what can be added. And I think your point about, having some female presence, especially I would say for boys and girls to have a female presence, but at least a female presence for the female sports, so that there is that person that they can relate to, that, like you said, has walked in their shoes, that they can look up to and say that, that could have been me at one point, or, even to see role models as coaches, I think, keeps the door open for those possibilities with young women, young girls.
I think you're right. And again, fortunately, we've made slow progress. We'll call it progress. We've made slow progress in that area of having, females, head college coaches, head professional coaches. The more we see it, the more these kids are going to believe that they can be it.
Totally agree. 100% agree. And I just want to go back to something you mentioned before, that I skipped over, and I just want to make sure that we hit this for our listeners, that for all coaches, you said many times you hear that one of your athletes wants to quit through another teammate. What are some signs that you might be able to pick this up before it gets to that point that maybe, coaches, all coaches can just look for, especially in the high school, junior high female? Um, what are some of those maybe signs that this person is headed towards giving this up?
I think for female athletes, it might be a little bit easier to read just because of the nature of. I don't want to label females as being more emotional, but I would say that at least in the athletes I've observed, that seems to be the case. You can read body language pretty well. The student athlete starts to pull back from communicating with you as the coach. They tend to not be as engaged in their team, team outings, whether it be, off season, during the season, on the weekends. Even in practice, you can just kind of tell body language. They're starting to remove themselves from the group that they might hang out with or choose to be with for a particular drill. And then just in their play on the court or the field or wherever it is that you're at, you've probably seen them at their peak effort. And when you can tell that they're not making progress, probably just showing up, going through the motions, those are all things that should be red flags that something's going on, whether it's them thinking of quitting or if there's something else, going on that they are needing to deal with.
Right. So yeah, it doesn't have to lead to quitting. It could be issues at large. And so yeah, those are great. Just reminders, because again, coaches are gung ho about the next game, the next practice, the next, drill. And sometimes we do forget to just maybe take a step back and see where everybody is, or engage our assistant coaches to help, keep an eye on that and have that be part of the responsibility. Instead of just having it be organic, just give it the responsibility to people to actually just keep an eye out.
Especially, in the last several years with the heightened awareness of mental health. I agree with you, Barb. I think, if there can be one person kind of dedicated with that task, you're going to catch things probably earlier than had you just allowed it to be. So
let me ask you that, since you touched on it also, mental health. We all know the pandemic was tough on everybody. And for whatever reason, it seems like it was, and again, these are new studies. So yes, they're probably still in study, but harder on females, harder on the high school females than the males. Do you have a sense of that? And have you seen an uptick in both for the schools and the sports programs?
I do have a sense of that. I can feel it in myself the last couple
Yeah.
of years. There's just a need for connection and, again, the sense of belonging. Guys, I think, are okay. Like, they can stay connected through their gaming, their, texting, their, being connected through somehow their device. I really do think that females need that face to face, that in-person interaction. And I would say that once we were able to return to play, even with the most restrictions right away, you could just see the sense of community and belonging that these girls needed. I'm so happy we're at a place right now where we've kind of seen that build back up. But definitely, I would say that that was a concern for us.
That's a great point. That's a great point about, and I think you used the word emotional, but I don't know if it's emotional or just relational. Girls seem to be, even in college coaching, the relationships were so much more important with females. And that's why I think our transfer rates are so are booming right now, that, transferring from one college to another, is because the relationship does not have a chance to form with the recruiting process going so fast today and the way it works. And that's why I find my team came out. I mean, that's why we came out as a company, just to be able to help these young women with that relationship piece, and keep it important if it's important to them, so that they can find the right fit. Because if they don't, it's just like, students in the high school, if they don't feel a fit, if they don't feel like they belong, they're not going to be happy, and they're not going to be able to produce it, the same as if they would, if they really felt they belong and they fit and they were able to participate, and all of those things. It can still be hard, but it would be looked at differently.
Well, and don't you think the college athlete as well is expected maybe to be able to manage and deal with that a little bit more independently? So just because of their age, they're maturing, they're in that transition period, from being a dependent to being out on their own. And so maybe they don't have someone that's going to be that person that's going to help them find the fit.
Right. It gets shelved. That whole piece gets shelved. And the most important thing becomes finding a college. Never mind fit yet, just find a college or find an option. And I think they miss out doing it that way, instead of the reverse, find the fit and bring the sport along. It's find the sport and bring the fit along. If it works out, great. If not, great. I think that's a disservice to our athletes.
They deserve more than just an option.
Agreed. And there are options. There's lots of options out there if they do it, with self-awareness first, finding their, what they want in a college experience first, and figure out who they are, what they want, and they will find opportunities, and they'll find ones that are great ones. So just, a couple more questions here. If you were to speak to just a group of high school students, or high school coaches, sorry, what would be some advice that you would give? And you've touched on it during this whole thing, but this is kind of summing it up. If you were talking to high school coaches, what would be your message to them in regards to their coaching female athletes? And they don't have any female coaches on the staff. What's your advice to that group?
Well, number one would be, if you have a place on your staff for a female to be, make that a priority.
Great.
Number two would be, become familiar with what the red flags are of your female student athletes. What are some common, like I mentioned earlier, body language things? What are some signs that your female athlete might be becoming disengaged in what they're doing with you? And then I would say, third, educate yourself on how to help a female navigate through the emotions, the feelings, kind of the packaging of, why are they there, so that they feel comfortable enough giving your program, your sport, an opportunity.
Great points. And if you were talking to a group of parents right now, and parents have a tough, they have a tough spot, because everybody wants their child to be happy. Number one, they want their child to be happy. And many of them want their child to be able to play in college if that's what they want. And sometimes if that's not what they want, they still want them to play in college. But what would you say, to a group of parents who are very involved, but also there could be things that they could catch in the way of their child is becoming burnt out, or their child is becoming, unhappy in some way? What would you say to parents?
Well, I'm not a parent myself, so it's hard for me to put myself in that role. But I guess just check in with your student athlete, game night, whatever it is. Don't have the conversation about winning and losing. Have the conversation about, did you have fun? they know their kid better than anybody else as far as how they handle their emotions. And I guess if the student athlete is giving indications that they want to quit, um, be be a person that is going to dig into that a little bit before you just say, okay, I'll support you in quitting. um, be educated in what is the bigger picture for being involved in sport, and then work with the coaches to maybe find if their involvement in the program isn't fulfilling any longer, then maybe we can find someone else that can provide that for them, or another program that might provide the same life skills that we're trying to encourage these kids to be part of as they're in sport. That's happened a few times where we've had athletes who have quit one thing. They've lost the love for it or just haven't found their role in it, but then have at least given an opportunity to try something else. And I guess that's all we want. We want kids to be involved because we see the value of what sport can give.
Right. I think you hit a great point too, that sometimes when your daughter, if you're a parent, when your daughter comes to you and starts complaining or venting, or, sort of like they did with, when we talked about it, they're coming to you, what is the best way to handle that? And you've said it, that, it would be the same thing that you did, was to try to figure out what it is, what's causing the issue. So is it, a coach, a teammate, a player, the playing time or something like that, where you can go and let's have a conversation with the coach or with the teammate, or, open up the conversation, because pretty much most of the time those things are misunderstandings, or, expectations got missed somewhere along the way, and a communication about it would maybe help the situation, where many times parents just don't go there because the athlete who caused the issue, or the coach who caused the issue, or playing time or whatever, gets turned that it's somebody's fault that she's unhappy. And so the walls go up and the conversation never gets to be had because of that.
Communication is huge. And if parents and if our female athletes are feeling like they are not willing to deal with the conflict, the interpersonal conflict that might be happening with a teammate or a coach, the reality is we are going to encounter conflict our entire lives. So we've got to find a way to work through the conflict versus just taking the easy way out and quitting. Otherwise, we're doing a disservice. We, the parent, we, the coach, we, the adult, are doing a disservice for these young females by not allowing them to develop the skills to get them empowered to be able to do this on their own. Communication is huge.
Yeah, I so agree. And we're up against a tough time with communication, because individuals do spend a lot of time on the screen, on their phones, Snapchatting and texting, and a lot of things happen through that phone, and there is less face-to-face contact. So you, as a staff, you might have to work on that more, and as parents, you might have to work on that more, just to make sure that they are able to communicate what they want, what they're feeling, not through phone, but through face-to-face contact, and practice doing that.
Yeah, face to face is it really, in my opinion, the only way to have conversations like this when it involves, the topic of quitting, or even if it's not quitting, if it's just a tough conversation that needs to be had with the student athlete about their role, or the expectations you mentioned a moment ago that may have just been misunderstandings. It's hard to get the true intention of a conversation if it's not face to face.
Yeah, and I do think I said all the problems were coach, player, playing time or something, but I know there are other issues, bad grades, or a missed expectation on a homework assignment, or a boyfriend girlfriend situation. I know there's a lot of things that these young student athletes are sifting through and trying to figure out who they are in the first place.
You're right. You know, we've kind of focused just on the topics of quitting and burnout and you know the specific relationships within the team and our kids are just coming to us with so much more than that right now.
What are some of the other issues that you see right now in 2022, 23? What you're going to be seeing here?
Well, I think you hit on a few of them. You know, social media is huge. You know, you can't control what kids are doing on the device behind a screen. I use that word control again because it always comes back down to what can you control? You know, what are you allowing yourself to react to or respond to? Social media is huge. I think there's increasing pressure academically on our students,
Hmm.
you know, starting as you know as young as kindergarten, like let's get them going sooner, let's get them writing and doing their numbers sooner, and by the time they get to be an upperclassman in high school, we are very fortunate that our students have opportunities to take a number of high level college level courses as a high school student, that they are, you know, they see the opportunity that opens for them. They're getting college credits here, and some of our high school graduates are going into a university campus already, potentially as a sophomore in college with credits when they leave here. Well, that's great on one hand, but that really kind of restricts them in the time they might need to develop a sense of who they are and what they're trying to do. So I think just the pressure of academics is playing into it a lot as well. And then that goes back to the athletic side that we've been talking about, starting at an earlier and earlier age with competitive sports.
So with everything you just sort of stated, if you were talking to a group of high school female student athletes right now, what are some things that you would say, to preserve sport, to keep it fun, to try to, avoid burnout, quitting, and all those things that happen? What are some things, maybe tools or just advice that you could give student athletes to help them navigate this?
I think it's all about balance. And again, our school provides the opportunity for the kids to gain these college credits. But academically, is that the best thing for them when they are a kid that is involved in, you know, 3 activities or an after school club, or potentially having to work a part-time job to help support, you know, family needs at home? And I just think there needs to be someone that can help our female student athletes develop a sense of balance there, whether that's someone within our school system, someone that's a coach that's involved in that student athlete's life, or someone from home. And in many cases, it might be a combination of the above. But there's got to be these high school student athletes, again, they don't know what they don't know. So it might look great to do all these things, but if they haven't gone through it and learned how to manage it, that's when we're going to start to see the issues of burnout and quitting. So it really is a team effort.
Well, I think the team effort is exactly right. If you could get, coaches on board and even some of the teachers on board who interact with these student athletes, and the parents on board, it is a team effort to try to help these young people sort of leave the nest, is so general, but go out into the real world and be able to make a difference, and to be able to make it, without, landing in trouble and some of the crazy things that go on later in life. They're all going to hit obstacles and things. It's going to happen. So how are we preparing them to do that?
And we can get them so far and then pass them on to someone like you and Find My Team to help them in that the transition of, okay, we've gotten you here, but now there's so much more. There's more doors, there's more opportunities opening for you. And, you know, from a public education, a high school education point of view, we also don't know everything that these kids are going to have to do. So it's great that there's people like you and Find My Team out there to help our females in that transition.
Well, I appreciate that. And, to arm these kids and, they're kids, they turn women right in front of us. They're kids to women. And we see that transition. And are we arming them to be able to, to navigate everything that they're going to have to go through, even littlest things of how to ask for help and how to find help, because in life, they're going to need help. They're just going to need help. Nobody's going to be able to do it on their own. And so how do we help them ask for it, know they need it, ask for it, and find it? Those are really important tools that we should be teaching all of our young, not even just student athletes, but all of our students, all of our young children.
And those needs don't go away.
Yeah.
Someone at my age is feeling the need for something, and I've learned how I can reach out and have the communication tools to ask people for help or guidance or the resources that I might need to get me where I'm wanting to go.
Well, Joselyn, I can't thank you enough. I know we're out of time here. This conversation could go on for hours, I know. And there's just so many topics on this, but what you're doing is so important. And I'm so glad that you're in the shoes that you're in and you're able to help these young girls. And I just hope that the message of we need more females coaching, but we also need males to understand what you're talking about as well, because a lot of them are the female and the male on the staff. And if they can help in this regard, that's helping these young people. And it's beyond the sports. It's beyond the sport they play. Winning is important. Pushing them is important. And sometimes yelling at them is important. All those things are important, but being there for them and allowing them to feel a purpose and that somebody has their back, that they could go to in times of distress, that's just as important. Thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate this conversation and everything that you're doing.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation, Barb.
All right. Well, to be continued, Joselyn.